Howdy folks, cost of living crisis. As the election draws nearer, you're going to hear the two major parties more and more often promise to tackle the cost of living crisis. But if you listen carefully, you'll realize they don't tell you what steps they will actually take. They just say, we'll tackle the cost of living crisis. Well, I'm standing for election to represent the great state of New South Wales in the Federal Senate, to represent the Citizens Party. My name is Andy Schmulow, and I'll tell you how I will tackle the cost of living crisis. One of the most significant parts of the cost of living, one of the biggest expenses that we all face, is the cost of groceries, the cost of food, the cost of feeding ourselves. Food has become incredibly expensive. Why? Because Coles and Woolworths have crushing market power. That's not my opinion. That's the finding of the ACCC report, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission report that was issued last month. They have crushing market power, and they are now the most profitable supermarkets in the world. They've also increased their margins since the beginning of COVID. So they're charging us more. They're making groceries ever more expensive. They're making record profits by global scales. And this is why food is so expensive. So this is how I will tackle this problem. You give the ACCC, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, what's called a divestiture power. You write that into the legislation. A divestiture power gives the ACCC the power to break up Coles and Woolworths and to bring more competition into the grocery market. The more competition there is, the more it will bring prices down. This is Economics 101. This is something we all understand. Competition brings prices down. And there's plenty of scope to bring those prices down because remember, these two, Coles and Woolworths, are the most profitable supermarkets in the world, right? A divestiture power is an anti-monopoly power. You put that power into the legislation and you say to the ACCC, go and break up Coles and Woolworths. And how do you do that? You say to Coles and you say to Woolworths, you've got 6 months. In that 6 months, you have to give us a list of 1/3 of all of your shops. 1/3 that you're going to sell. Which shops will be on that list? There are all sorts of ways that you can manage the criteria. For example, you could say 1/3 of the list must be your top grossing, 1/3 your middle grossing, and 1/3 your low grossing stores. You then, Coles and Woolworths, you have to come up with a list of 1/3 of your stores and you have to put them up for sale. And then the people who buy them are not allowed to be the same American investors who already own Coles and Woolworths, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. So we bring competition into our market. We make sure that 1/3 of Coles and 1/3 of Woolworths are now owned by other companies. So instead of having 2 major supermarkets, we've got 4 plus Aldi, 5. And this takes us back to a time when there was a lot of competition in our grocery market, when there was Bilo and Safeway and Franklin's and Joules and lots of other supermarket chains that were state-specific. When you have more competition in the market, that brings prices down. And we see that in Europe and we see it in the United States. There are 12 major supermarket chains in the United States. There are 14 major supermarket chains in Europe. Let me tell you what the results of that are. In the United States, the average return on equity for a supermarket chain is 1.4%. 1.4. Guess what Coles' return on equity is? 34%. This is an incredibly profitable business because they have no competition. They are a monopoly with 2 different names. Coles and Woolworths are in reality the same company. So we have to break them up. Elect me to the Federal Senate and I know how to draft that legislation. I know because I'm an associate professor in a law school. I know because I've appeared before the supermarket inquiry that was run by the Senate. I know because the recommendations that I made to that supermarket inquiry were adopted by the Federal Senate, but then the government turned its back on those recommendations. Why? Because it doesn't matter who's elected, whether it's Liberal or Labor. If either of those parties are elected, they won't tackle the monopoly status of Coles and Woolworths, because Coles and Woolworths are major party political donors, because Coles and Woolworths fund the Liberal Party and the Labour Party's election campaigns. I represent a party that does not take corporate donations. We have never taken corporate donations and we never will. Send me to the Senate and I will break up Coles and Woolworths. I will make sure that we have competition in our grocery market, and then you will see prices will come down.